Welcome back, everybody, to another Growth Support Conversation. My name is Neil, and today I'm joined by Craig Stoss to talk about value and friction in the end customer experience and finding the balance of where, when, why, and what, and how to make a seamless experience. But before we dive in, Craig, you want to talk about yourself, where you're from?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Craig Stoss. I'm based near Toronto, Canada, and have been in the CX space for better part of 25 years. Before it was kind of called customer experience, but I've done everything from teach teenagers summer computer camps to consult on best practices in software engineering with Fortune 500 companies. So I have kind of covered the gamut of customer support, customer experience, and most recently I joined a startup called KODIF to lead out their customer success and partnership programs to bring AI software into the CX space and kind of be part of this revolution that we're seeing in the support arena.
Nice, thank you so much. I think you're kind of breaking the fourth wall a little bit. I think it's always interesting working for like an actual company that helps CX people do their roles better, coming from a CX background yourself. Has that been an interesting experience for you?
Yeah, it's kind of was when I was looking for work last year. I made it very specifically that I didn't want to go to just any SaaS company. I have led support teams in several SaaS companies, small and big, and I felt that given the way the future is changing right now, I mean, we are seeing such a shift in customer demands and the expectations of the people we serve. We're seeing shifts in how support is treated within the organization, and then of course the technology that encompasses insights, analytics. I'm really seeing this shift towards support being more of a center of operational excellence versus maybe 10 years ago when it was still seen as this entry level stepping stone role or a cost center. I think that whole paradigm is shifting, and so I was very, very concentrated on the types of roles that I think could be part of that evolution, part of bringing these new concepts to the market, because I think in the end this is what customers are demanding, and so this evolution is inevitable. And so that it was absolutely a concentrated choice to do this, and I've had a great time doing it. I think that we have a great product, and I think the industry as a whole is really competitive and really exciting, and people are just finding new techniques every day and breaking new ground every day. And of course, the models that underlie all this, are changing every day. We just had that big announcement with Deep Sea, literally 4 days ago. So it's just pretty incredible to see the pace of this particular market.
Yeah, I agree with you. That paradigm is shifting from what was a very traditional, very kind of, static in that sense, to where now we have such an industry that's changing and exploring. You mentioned that customers are demanding it now. And I'm curious, because when you were talking about value and friction in a customer experience, what do you think is a seamless customer experience from your perspective?
Seamless to me is an experience where you use the context you have to remove the questions and the iterations with your clients. And that's not just at a support level, but that's at a web page level, that's at a pricing level, that's at a sales call level, that's at an implementation level, right? It's the idea here is that if I know something about you that makes my life easier, at the very most, I should be confirming it with you. Like, for example, I had to call an airline a couple months ago. I was flying, and there was some problem with my account, and I couldn't do something online. So first off, who wants to call anymore? But I called the airline, and it rang a couple of times, and then picked up and said, "Hi, we recognize this phone number is tied to your account, and you have a flight in 2 days to Denver. Is this the flight you're calling about?" And I said yes, and it was like, "Okay, thank you. All our agents are busy. Our estimated callback time is 10 minutes. Would you like to call us to call you back?" I said yes. And it took about 12 minutes, but they did call back, and they already had my itinerary up on the screen and were ready to discuss it. Now, that's to me completely seamless, because how many times have you been on a call, whether it be an airline or any other type of business, and you're trying to remember your NATO alphabet, and I want to, I'm saying N, no M, no N, N, M, that just adds friction. But they knew something about me. In this case, my phone number. My phone number is clearly tied to my account with the airline. Yeah, use that context, right? That is a seamless experience, and I think that's what customers are demanding now, because they know the technology exists, because they've seen it used by the Facebooks and the Googles to market to us and use our information to sell to us and to change our opinions on things. And the Cambridge Analytica scandal, like all of this stuff. And now customers saying, well, hey, you're going to steal my data anyways, use it to benefit, right? And that I think is what creates that's what's creating the demand. And then on top of that, I think that's what allows us as customer facing professionals to provide those seamless experiences.
And a more personal one as well. Like, they already know your actual interactions that you have. You said they already had your itinerary. It makes it feel much more cared for, much more personal in that sense, and be able to do those things. So I think from my perspective, I saw your framework that you made with value, where there's much more valuable things and the friction increases across. I think it's a wonderful visual of a heat map. And I'm curious a little bit, like where you say you have a couple of things. One, where you make customers work if the value is really, really high. And there's also high friction in that experience. I'm curious to dive into that one a little bit, because when I've seen your conversations around this, it's really make it smooth, reduce that friction, reduce that value. And then when I go into my organization, or I know that other people go into their organizations and they say, hey, we want to do this thing. We want to make it super, super easy. We want to unlock it for customers. And then maybe other stakeholders in the organization are like, no, we want some friction there. Like we want to have some blockers there. I'm curious your kind of opinion on having purposeful friction in some of that experience, or some places when you say use the data, use it, make it fresh.
Yeah, no, I think purposeful data makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. I think it's the accidental friction that's the problem, and we can come back to that. But on a purposeful front, right? My classic example is two-factor authentication. Clearly friction, right? People have to pull out their phones. I had a situation the other day where I had to log into a shared account, and it was tied to someone else's cell phone that works in a different time zone, so I have to Slack them, and like there's friction there. But there's a really good reason for that friction, right? It's security, it's safety of your data. You can, I'm sure there's security experts screaming at their cell phones right now as they listen to this podcast, but it is more secure, and there's a real reason for that purposeful friction. But I also think in some cases, we're actually discussing this as part of the support team that we're building. Here is, we want a way where we're customer-facing software at KODIF, and so if something were to go down after hours or on weekends when we're not in, we want a way for our customers to contact us. But we don't want to make that easy, because we also don't want to be woken up at 2 a.m. on a Saturday because someone someone didn't load the web page correctly, right? We want it to be used for real critical situations, and so there's a little bit of friction you want to put in there so that it becomes a very purposeful action. So for example, maybe if we were to use, this is a hypothetical, let's say we wanted to use Slack as a way of triggering a pager duty alert to someone. Well, maybe the way to do that is not just clicking an emoji, which anyone could do accidentally. Maybe it's filling out a form, like what went wrong? What have you tried to solve it? Is this affecting multiple users or multiple browsers? Like, just put in some purposeful information so that it shows that you've thought through this, and then have a big red button that says, if you click this button, someone is getting paged, and just have that kind of human element of, is this thing worth waking someone up at 2 a.m. on a Saturday for, right? And that's purposeful friction, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, if that was your process to open every support ticket, then that's probably wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just going to cause frustration and anger. It's like, listen, I just want to open a support ticket. I don't want to fill out 25 fields and give you a life history to open a support ticket. And I think that that's a pretty easy example, but this happens everywhere. This happens, on implementation calls where, you need to have some purposeful friction. If I say, a lot of companies integrate with, say, Salesforce. And if you say, oh, do you integrate with Salesforce? You're like, oh, yeah. The salesperson's like, yeah, we integrate with Salesforce. And then you get to the implementation. It's like, well, actually, we only integrate in one very specific way, and you want another specific way. Well, yeah, that was a seamless sales process, but now you've added a ton of post friction. So
Yeah.
having that upfront friction to ask a few more clarifying questions makes a lot of sense. Like, oh, well, what are you wanting to do with this integration? So that's the type of thing that I think about when I think of purposeful friction is let's put friction in where it makes sense in order to solve future problems or in order to ensure that there's like a lot of clarity or security as another example. So yeah.
I hear a lot of things there, and I think it's a really great, clear examples as well. Some of the use cases that I think of are like actions that can't be undone, like deleting your account. Like you definitely want some user
Yeah.
responsibility and purposeful friction there as well. So like security, really ensuring that they actually want to go forward with it. Like I love that you mentioned a couple of examples that are also not just user experience, like actually going through and clicking the product or clicking, actually in their account or something like that. But you also use this sales process example where it's not necessarily something that is, platform or tooling specific, but it's also just in the conversations that you have. And it's actually setting your customers up for success by, longer on down the road by trying to address that friction up front and make sure it's the right solution. So
Exactly.
it,
Yeah.
it begs the question a little bit of like, what are those aspects or where do you consider friction in that experience as a CX leader or a support leader? What are those kinds of things or areas that you look at?
That's a great question. I think that where I look at it is, I think this whole the article that you're referring to in the framework came from the idea of metrics, right? It came from this idea of we measure things from our perspective, and our perspective doesn't take into account the customer's friction or the customer's frustration, right? Which sounds counterintuitive when you're talking about customer experience. It sounds very counterintuitive when you think talking about customer experience, really. And so, so for me, when I'm consulting with a company or when I'm trying to build a process, I think about, well, what is the user trying to do in this case? Like if a user, let's start with a very generic example. A user comes to your website. What is the user trying to do? And I'm not talking about the 100% case. I'm talking about like the 80-20 rule here, right? So I know as a support leader, let's say I'm trying to buy software and I'm going to look at 5-10 companies' websites to see which software companies I want to talk to. What am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for probably maybe a quick demo. Can you just show me a little bit about what your UI looks like? What types of features are unique to you? Like, what's your differentiation? I'm probably looking for some pricing. Maybe I'm looking for some help documentation or something that I can just take a quick look at. Do you solve this particular use case that I might have? So I know that it's even worth having this conversation. But I'm looking for some very core things. And so step one is, are those things easily accessible? Like, do I need to fill out a form and wait 3 days for a salesperson to get back to me to have a demo? That's friction, right? Because like I'm searching now and I want to just I understand that you can't tell a whole product story in 60 seconds, 90 seconds, but at least give me a taste. Give me this idea of, are you a mature enough company that has a proper UI that has proper features that I want to buy, right? And so those types of things, I think we add a lot of friction. The pricing, the one that gets me so much is when you go to pricing page and there's literally no pricing. Like it says something like, "Oh, for all pricing, contact support,"
and then you contact them
sales.
and they give you a PDF of what would be a pricing menu on the website.
Exactly.
Like, oh, great!
Well,
This is
at best, right? I mean, I've had ones where they make you go through like the hour call, and then you say, "Okay, well, can you tell me roughly what this costs?" It's like, "Oh, well, it's too complex to share with you." And it's like, are you insulting my intelligence? Like, I don't need a number that's going to be on the contract that I sign. I need a range. Is it 10K? Is it 20K? Is it 100K? Is it 300,000? Like, I just need a number so I can get a rough idea, especially in the AI world where everyone charges differently. They per resolution, platform fees, per conversation. There's no number that I can just go and say, well, this is the budget for my software that I'm buying. So that stuff frustrates me, right? And I think that frustrates a lot of users. But this is true for any case. I mean, how many times have you been to a retail site, like a store, you go to Staples or Walmart or whatever, and all you want to find is the hours of the closest store to you. And I'll tell you, some stores make it incredibly difficult to find the hours of the store closest to you. That's incredibly friction. It's incredible friction to me.
I know that in my personal experience, I don't even go to the store's website anymore. I just Google it, and then it's estimated there. I'm like, this should be all right. We'll show up.
It should be roughly okay. Yeah, it should be that's true. Okay. but why does that work? It works because Google's removed the friction, and you can have tons of opinions on whether that's a problem. Like, I know Google has gotten some trouble about those types of things, but the reason why that's so powerful is because it removes the friction. Yeah. And there's no reason why your website can't do that. So I think that's what I think about when I to your question about how do I think about friction. I think about it as what is the user trying to do? So contacting support. What is the user trying to do when they want to contact support? Like, do they need to contact support? Is there a self-service option? Is our knowledge base not working? Do we not have enough in-app support or in-product support, whatever it might be? I talk about IoT a lot in my work because, if I have a device that by definition is connected to my account, it's connected to the internet, it knows my history of how I've used the device, like it had all the data is there somewhere in the cloud connected to this physical device. And then it's like, oh, I want to contact support. Oh no, go to your laptop and write an email about that device. No. That's friction. Just let me press a button on the device saying this device has a problem and, call me back or email me back or whatever. But like, I'm on the device realizing there's a problem, and you're making me leave the device to go and do something, right? I had one case for a particular IoT device where I was at my laptop and it was a chat. Like, I was in a chat widget with a human. And it was like, okay, can you give me your serial number? And so then I literally had to hold my laptop and, turn the device around and, manually type the serial number. And I was thinking, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, that seems so silly to me in today's world, right? And so that's friction. Like, that's what I start to look for is what is the customer trying to do and how do we enable that as easily as possible, as seamless as possible?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations around, if you know the information about a customer, like it's good information, you don't necessarily need to ask. Like, of course, for security, verifications, and things like that, and responsibility, of course. But at the same time, like, if they're contacting you, that information, just use it. Use it in that experience. I've told my teams, at least, like, hey, if a customer comes to you and that that they want to accomplish something and that we have the ability to do it and they're there and in the moment, like, just do it for them. Don't send them to go do something else and like there's going to be so many things that could possibly happen in that turnaround time that it could make them abandon that process or have even more issues or something like that. Take ownership over that experience and be able to cut that through. I love the example that you use of the demo. It's the same. I love it because consistency is key, I think, in customer experience as well. And I love it because it's consistent, because it's the same example that you used in the Startup Smoothie podcast that you did with Devin as well, a long ways back. In that sense. I just think it's a funny example. But it makes a lot of sense in that way. So you've kind of defined friction now of these kind of pointless areas of like, hey, we should be able to do this. Why can't we do this? Or users really want to do this. Why can't we do this? And now you're kind of branching into where support leaders kind of look. How do you think a support leader can best go about the process of trying to remove that friction? Because sometimes it's not necessarily dependent on only what the support leader can control.
Oh, that's absolutely true, right? And this goes back to the famous Shep Hyken quote around that CX is not a department, it's a mentality, right? I think your company has to be bought into this as a concept. So maybe this is where to bring in the value part of the conversation, right? So I mean, my examples I just gave were kind of examples from the negative side of like what is the friction that we're introducing. But the other way to think about it is what is the value that we're trying to deliver. And so there every interaction has value, right? If I have a phone call with someone, whether it be a customer or a partner that I'm trying to build with, there's each of us is trying to get some value. In a business sense, that's often, I'm trying to get money for my business and they're trying to get some, software to solve a problem, right? I mean, that's the traditional kind of value, but it goes way beyond that, right? If the hours example, the value I want is simply to know if I am able to go to your store right now, right? That's like a super simple value, but that is the value I want. And that has
Yeah.
some there's some importance to that value at a given time. And so that's kind of how I think about removing friction is, okay, well, how do I deliver the given value faster or more efficiently or automatically or proactively? Like there's tons of ways to think about it. And that's the starting point is just to try to think about why people are coming to you. What's the value that they're trying to receive? Something I've asked. I gave a talk at a conference last year, and something I asked the audience was, how many people in a CX context look at the navigation patterns on your homepage, on your web page? And basically, no one put up their hand. But I said, wouldn't it be telling if you looked at your web page and saw that they clicked on, I don't know, say the about page or the pricing page, doesn't matter. They clicked on some page, it immediately bounced. To me, that would be a complete reflection that some value is missing from that website, from that particular site, because they've gone there thinking, oh, I click on about, I'm going to get something that I want to get, whatever that is, and they don't find it. They're like, okay, well, screw this, and they close the web page. That's a pretty interesting metric to me when it comes to like providing value. And so that's, when you say about it being a very cross-functional thing, that's what it is. Like, it's not just about, is Zendesk set up correctly to answer a response, or is my, CRM tool set up to notify me when, the monthly active users drop on an account. Like, those are all useful things that we should be doing as CX professionals. But it's more about the actions the user are taking, across the entire customer journey. And so when you say about how do I go about solving these things, is it really starts with talking to the customer about what they want at what parts, at what points in the customer journey. So, an implementation example is, the customer, if you're doing software, you have an implementation cycle most companies would have. And so what does that mean? What is the value they're trying to get out of that implementation cycle? Well, they're probably trying to start to solve their top problem. They don't want to, they're not going to try to boil the ocean, but they want to boil an egg, and, once that egg is boiled, then they'll boil the next bigger thing. And so how do you deliver that fast? And I mean, it'll be different for every company. Some companies try to use a wizard, like you log in for the first time, it says, oh, what's your job? And what types of things are you trying to do? And then it sets up your interface in a way that they think is a good default. I like that, right? I think that's a smart thing to do. Some customers try to customize it. There's some companies try to customize it and be like, okay, well, we're going to do a consultation for 1 hour, go away, and then we're going to kind of come back with a proposal, and then you agree to the proposal. Like, again, maybe more friction there, but not necessarily a bad solution, right?
I mean,
You're
they're
still trying to
really
deliver
for success.
Yeah, exactly. You're really trying to go for their success. So yeah, I think that's it. And I think the other thing is, and this is an example I've used before in articles and on LinkedIn, it's also about what the customer's expectation is, right? So this is a study that was done last year about fast food times through the drive-through. And of all the major fast food companies, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Burger King, KFC, whatever they all were, they did studies, and Chick-fil-A's wait time in the drive-through was the longest wait time of all its competitors. Now, if I only knew that metric, if I was a CX leader at Chick-fil-A and I only knew that metric, I might say, holy crap, we're behind our competitors. Like, rush, 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 right? But somewhat more interestingly is the context of that was their order accuracy was higher, and therefore their customer satisfaction was the highest out of all their competitors. So if you had optimized for the traditional, average handle time, if you will, you would have actually hurt the customer experience and the customer satisfaction. So that's something to take into account when you're trying to remove friction from these processes, is what are the customers valued? Well, in this case, customers valued order accuracy over wait time. And I think that is something that we all need to think about in a customer experience context, is time isn't the only thing people value. And honestly, do this test. Get a room full of people, have everyone close their eyes, and tell them, half the room to put their hand up after 3 minutes and half the room to put their hand up after 4 minutes. No one's going to be able to tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
And yet, if we were to decrease handle time or hold time on our phone call channel from 4 to 3 minutes, that would have a huge gold star, 25% improvement. We would send that to the executive team. But yet no one can actually tell the perceptible difference of that. It's so counterintuitive that we measure these things that aren't valued in the traditional sense by our customers.
Yeah.
And that's the key, in my opinion, is to think about what the customers value from the given interaction.
I think that makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I think is metrics in isolation are blinding a bit because you're so focused on that one thing. And to your drive-through example as well, if you compare it to first response time for anything, they've done a lot of research that's, first response time within a certain level for email channel doesn't make a difference. Like, it doesn't necessarily make an incredible difference on the journey, but you need to realize that speed versus accuracy, and creating a balanced scorecard that creates that context is really, really important. Like, yes, we'll drop this metric, but it means this for the rest, and this is what our customers expect. And also different industries, different standards mean different expectations from customers in terms of things. So also just understanding your actual customer and what the value is that they perceive is really, really important as well. And I think one of the things that I look at when I look at my dashboards is a lot of times I find myself saying, oh yeah, and this happened because of this, and this happened because of this, and actually, well, it's not bad because we were going through this. And it's just providing the context of what actually is happening, besides just looking at that one hard metric that's like, hey, we need to do something about this. This is crazy. But that context is super important in understanding what that customer value actually is.
Yeah, great summary. That's exactly correct.
In terms of really being able to understand where support leaders can start to understand that context, I think what you mentioned, CX is that mentality. It's not necessarily just that one function that just goes and does its thing. It really, really needs to be a partner across the organization. Is there something that you think that CX leaders could do to start building that relationship and that mentality within their organizations?
I think if you and I solved that problem, we could probably just go and write a bunch of books and go on a speaking tour and become rich, right? Because I think it's an absolute problem that everyone suffers, right? I think first and foremost, there is an old guard in our industry right now. And I don't mean that by generation. I don't mean that by industry. I just mean in general, there are a group of people who grew up with CSAT, grew up with NPS, grew up with handle time, maybe have come from the contact center days of Burnham and Chernham, 100% occupancy, and this group of people perpetuate the cost center model and forget that there's a changing industry around it. I mean, I wrote an article recently where I said, you know, my first support job was in 2000. My first software support job was in 2001, and I was, other than the fact that you know, help desk tools were a lot more rudimentary, and phone was the main channel back then because not everyone had an email back in 2001. You know, other than that, all the metrics were the same as what we traditionally measure today. That's 23 years, 24 years ago, right? That makes literally no sense, right? Because the world has shifted so much, and the channels have changed, and the technology has improved. And so I think first and foremost, we have to reset the mentality of the old guard, and we have to reset the mentality of the company, right? And show them that with very little investment, because a lot of the stuff I've talked about is not, you know, not going to cost you 100 grand a year, right? It's just a process change or a website change. Like, it's not, like, most of the stuff is free to do, right? Like, it's not even that big difficult to implement. It's just convincing people that these tasks have a value, and there's no secret sauce to that beyond. I like the grassroots approach. So pick 2 or 3 of these things. You know, pick a couple that are, you know, really pertinent to your business, whatever it is you do, and A/B test it, or just make the change and measure, you know, 2 months, 1 quarter before, 1 quarter after, and see what the difference is, and just show that you make this small change to your website, or you know, you tweak the way you know, you put a focus for a month on your knowledge base, and making sure that your knowledge base is updated every single day with certain information, or, you know, you make public that 90-second demo that you used to guard behind a paywall, right? Whatever it is, make that small change, and then measure, you know, what that outcome is. What is the person receiving value? Did more people who watched that video convert to paying customers? Did whatever it is. You know, I think that's the way to start, is just grassroots it. As I said, most of this stuff does not cost a ton of money, if any money at all, and then show that these little tiny change. One thing that I say, you know, often when I'm in these conversations is, we talk about you know, death by 1,000 cuts all the time. You know, like, people that are just, you know, worn down over and over with these small little defects or small little frustrations, and eventually they just stop buying your product or stop going to that restaurant or whatever it is, right? Success is the same. Customer experience and customer success is kind of the same thing. It's success. I say success through 1,000 hugs, because, yeah, you know, let's go back to my Air Canada example from the start of the call. Them recognizing my flight itinerary and calling me back within the time they told me they would isn't going to make me buy necessarily more Air Canada flights, but it certainly isn't a reason not to buy Air Canada flights, right? And I think that's the point, right? Is if you do 1,000 of these small little good things, you give less reasons for people to leave you. Whereas if you don't do those 1,000 hugs, there's more reasons for people to leave you, right? And I think that is the mentality that you need to talk to your executives about, and get the company on board as a company value or a company direction, that these things need to be measured and tracked and improved upon.
I love that analogy. I think it's awesome. My brain was already like, all right, how am I going to get my team out to go really think about this in the day-to-day, and also just think about how they can actually make that customer experience just that much better, to make sure that, you know, we don't give them a reason to leave, right? It's not necessarily about, you know, hey, there's no reason not to buy more. I love the way you put that. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on value and friction and how we can go about really thinking about what exactly those things are in the customer experience and sharing your thoughts on that. I really appreciate that. I have one last question for you, because I'm really curious. You said that you have the years of experience and everything in terms of like being able to see all the different perspectives. And is there one thing, like even just outside of the CX experience or anything, that you've learned over your professional career that you still stick to today that really stands out?
Yes, I think why I'm so passionate about this stuff, and actually it's kind of the opening paragraph of the article that we're kind of discussing here is just that what I have learned. I've been so lucky through work to be able to see. I've been to 35 countries. I've worked with companies that like HSBC Bank and Honeywell, like massive organizations. I've worked with startups. I've just been so lucky and traveling the world and talking to these companies. One thing I've realized is that we are all consumers. We all consume in some way something, whether it be a child going to the grocery store with a $2 and saying I want to buy some candy, or whether it be a young couple buying their first home. We're all consumers, and so we have inherently a rough idea of how we want to be treated. And what I never, what I, because of that, I think that all of us in the CX space who have chosen this as our vocation, has chosen this as the thing we do, we should be able to use our own experiences to then make everyone else's lives easier. And I think what I've learned over and over and over is just that if everyone thought about the perspectives, they thought about their job from that perspective. Like, I'm a consumer. How do I want to be treated in this sense? I'm a consumer. How do my friends are consumers? How do my friends want to be treated in this sense? My customers are consumers. How do they want to be treated in this sense? If we just started thinking about that, as opposed to the focus that typically you see when you talk about 30, 60, 90-day plans, which is on, well, assessing the performance of the agents and assessing metrics and building a new dashboard. And, if we just started thinking, well, what is the perspective of the people I'm serving? And if we start at that, I think that we are in an actual position to improve people's lives, and that's what makes me passionate about this industry. Is that, yeah, selling AI software to CX teams, that's a pretty niche segment of people's lives I can improve, but I can improve those people's lives, and then the people who work in retail, they can improve the lives of the people that work at your particular retail store, and the people that work for the massive, the support departments of the huge companies like General Electric and, all these like massive organizations. They can improve a wider set of people's lives. Like telecom is a great example of that. Like, you work for a Verizon. How many customers does Verizon have? And how can you improve all of those people's lives, right? Through thinking about their perspective. So that's what I've learned, I think over my experience.
I think that perspective is huge. Like, just really, I mean, there's a bit the definition of customer centricity when you really boil it down in that sense of really thinking about your customers and how you can actually think from their shoes, and be put in their perspective. When you mentioned from telecom, my brain is like, I come from Verizon. I worked there. I saw all those customers.
Oh wow! Uh-oh, did I put my foot in my mouth?
No. It's a funny anecdote, but like, yeah, like seeing all of those people and just the effect and impact that, like seeing them run in and be like, my phone is broken. How can I need this. I need to be able to do this thing. Like, it's become such a part of the experience, the journey, that maybe your product or maybe your experience is much more than just what you offer. In that sense, like the value is not necessarily like, if you're selling a tool, it's not the tool that's the value. It's the task that you're trying to accomplish, or the thing that you're trying to get outside of it, that it enables, that it brings to life in that sense. And if you can start thinking about those goals that your customers have, and thinking about, my customer just wants to be able to call their family, like
Yeah.
it becomes much like a different perspective in that sense than just, yeah, it's just a phone. So
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it again, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Neil. This was a great conversation, and I hope your audience loved it.